Minimalists.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Minimalist Podcast, where we discuss what it means to live a meaningful life with less. My name is Joshua Fields-Milburn.
And I am Ryan Nicodemus, and together we are the Minimalists. And we have a special guest today.
Welcome to episode 163. Today we're going to talk about the lessons that we've learned from running businesses over the years, and because we're going to talk about business today, I thought we would bring in a special guest. Now, Jordan, we don't do interviews.
Right.
What we do is we bring people in occasionally and have them help us answer some questions.
Right.
I thought you'd be the perfect guy for this because recently you left a business that you started, and we get a lot of questions from folks about starting a business. And so, in a weird way, you didn't you restarted.
Yeah.
It wasn't started in a way. It was starting from scratch, but bringing forward the knowledge you already had.
Yeah, and it was traumatizing and everything along with it. In fact, it was right across the street.
Okay.
Oh, yeah,
wow.
which is kind of funny.
Yeah. So yeah, we're in Los Angeles right now, and your business you ran. The most popular thing was the podcast, Art of
Right.
Charm, which I
Yeah.
think you did for 11 years.
I did it for 11 years. Now I do the Jordan Harbinger show, which is like the follow-through. I don't know what you'd call it. The reboot of that.
Spin-off?
The spin-off, yeah.
Well, and
The more
obviously,
popular spin-off.
anything
I'll have you know.
anything changes over time. So what I noticed with the Art of Charm is it became this interview format show, and you're a really great interviewer.
Thank you.
And so we're not good at interviewing. So what we do is we just have folks show up and answer questions. In fact, usually it's like the Ryan podcast, and I'm a guest sometimes, and then it's the
That
Josh
is not
podcast, and he's a guest sometimes. But can you talk a little bit about the restarting before we dive into those questions? You had built up this sort of empire that was hard to let go of, I assume.
It was, yeah. So I built the Art of Charm, my old show and my old business, for 11 years. And it started off just like you would expect from the name, where it's about like going out and disclaimer, I started it when I was like 26. So it was about going out and meeting people, especially the opposite sex. And it was great. And then I turned 31, 32, and I was like, this is getting pretty played out. And then I ended up meeting my wife and getting married, and I was like, this is just kind of sad at this point. So I started interviewing athletes, generals, military people, entrepreneurs, really getting into the interview game and really enjoying that. And my business partners were not crazy about that at all, because they were like, let's talk about picking up girls. And I was like, hey, we're pushing 40. It's pathetic.
So wait, so this is something new. This is some behind the scenes. You were getting constant sort of pushback,
Yes.
from your business partners, and that thankfully didn't come out in the podcast. You were able to sort of leave that behind, the
Right.
turmoil of the everyday dealing with each other. But it sounds like there was a lot of tension going on in the background. I'm
There
sure.
was.
I'm sure it made things difficult to operate the business.
There was, yeah. I actually had to move away from Los Angeles. I moved up north to San Francisco because I just couldn't even... It's so funny how clear this all was going to play out in hindsight, right? I couldn't even be in the room because it would be like, oh, we should do this continuity thing where everybody pays $1 and then they forget about that it's on their credit card. And I'm like, guys, I don't want to do business like this. Like, this is weirdly, like, not just sort of internet marketing smarm, but just kind of like the ideas that were being tossed around, which thankfully most of which we never did, were kind of like, in my opinion, unethical. I'm a lot like you guys, where I'm like, let's create something great that people want to pay for, not be like, let's hope they forget that we have their billing information. Like, that's just gross.
Yeah.
Let's
you know?
let's have them forget that we're like constantly reaching into their wallet, grabbing $1 a month from
Right.
them, and not adding any value whatsoever.
Exactly. And that stuff just made me feel gross. And you guys and I are the same way, in which podcasts are free, as everyone listening knows. So I'm not like, how do I screw over the list? I'm trying to give them everything I have of artistic or intellectual value as free as I can make it before I actually go completely bankrupt and run my own ship into the ground. And then on the other side of the coin, it was like, how can we squeeze every last drop out of everyone who's listening? And so those, as you can imagine, those values did not align at all. That kind of thing, I had to get away from it. But the reason I didn't leave right then, because people are going, why the hell did you even stick around? The getting, and this is not shameful to admit because it's very just realistic, the getting was so good, right? Like the advertising, we were doing really cool stuff that people did like, and we were all getting paid a lot. And I was like, I can't leave. I'd have to start over like I did when I was 26. What am I going to do? I have, I'm married now. Like, how could I possibly start over? And then that choice was made for me because I started to negotiate an amicable split from my old business partners because they wanted me, among other things, to co-sign a loan, and I was the only one that had property. And I'm like, I'm not letting you guys spend my money for my house, car, wife, family, future kids. Like, you've already shown that you can't run a business. I'm not you guys have an Xbox and a dog. I'm not signing over my house. So that started a greater conflict.
Can you imagine? I'm going to put up my Xbox as collateral.
My dog
Yeah.
is collateral. Yeah.
Well-
Man, this is gonna be a great show because I mean, a lot of these questions revolve around people, whether they're starting business or they're trying to do something for their business, or if they're trying to leave their business. I mean, I think the two main things that we're really going to get out of today's podcast is, one, helping people understand how they can take that leap. What does it take to get to that point where you can look at this thing you've built and you can walk away from it? And the other thing too is, what do we do when we do start finding our business is out of alignment with our values and or our beliefs for that matter?
Yeah, and I think that it's funny, the starting over, there's a big fear thing there, right? So Jordan, you were afraid of walking away. I remember I had this dream last year, and it's one of the most memorable dreams I've ever had. I had a dream within the dream. It was very Inception-like.
Wow.
And
Very impressive.
I know, right?
You can't even be a minimalist in your dreams.
I woke up in the dream, and I was like none of this whole minimalism thing happened. Ryan and I didn't walk away from the corporate world. We were still in the corporate world, which is a nightmare, actually. Wow. It's a nightmare within a dream. And we didn't walk away, but I woke up and I told you the whole thing, like, Ryan, like, we started this website, and then there was this podcast, and we did a documentary, and we were on social media, and like we were helping people live a more meaningful life with less. And I'm the real stressed out one of the duo, as you can tell. Ryan's the real just calm, laid back. Anything can happen to him. And in the dream, he goes, "Oh, don't worry about it, man. We can just do it again." And I'm like, it was like this most profound thing, but it applies exactly to your situation.
It does.
You can walk away and do something that is in alignment with your values. Now, here's the thing. Maybe at one point in time, what you were doing did align with your values, but over time, you realize that your values, your beliefs, your interests, your desires change. And so what we are clinging to is a sort of past version of ourselves quite often. And if we can't change within the context of that, within the business, then maybe it's time to move on.
That's absolutely correct. Your business should, or your career, whatever, you don't have to own your own business, it should evolve with you. So and you hear about people getting stuck in jobs and they're like, "Oh, I've just outgrown this job." But very few people say, "I've outgrown this business that I started myself." Because usually our business is able to evolve with us, or hopefully our business is able to evolve with us. But if you have other people in the mix, you're going to grow at different rates. And this happens in relationships too. I mean, anybody who's been in a relationship and had to break off with somebody because their values changed, and I know that you guys have gone through this, at least, and especially you, because you were on my old show before, and we talked about this. You have to be able to evolve, and if somebody is kind of reeling you back in because of their values, whether it's a business or a relationship, you've got tough choices that you have to make, because you can't really tow other people along that easily. You can't really go, "Hey, I want to interview amazing people that are going to help people with their career and in their life and in these other ways. You guys all have to change." If they're rowing in a different direction, you're going to be miserable. And even if they're giving you enough leeway, like I was with my old show, to do whatever I wanted, they're still going to try to reel you back in once they see that, hey, we could make more money if you just did something you hated. Especially, my situation was unique but not unique. You know, my face and my name were at the forefront of the company. So if there was an embarrassing branding choice made, I was the one who had to deal with it. It wasn't them. They get to cash the checks just like everyone else. But I was the one who had to walk around being like the pickup artist guy at age 35, which is just sad.
People assumed you were responsible for those changes.
Of course.
And I think that's something to keep in mind. I remember we had this gal in Dallas, right? We did a tour last year, and she came up. She said, "Well, I have to." She's like, "I don't want to, but I have to have ads on my website." I'm like, "Well, if you want to have ads on your website, it's fine." But she had all these like Google pop-up ads and stuff, and she goes, "I really don't want to, but I know I have to." I'm like, "Well, that's your problem, is thinking you have to continue to do something that you don't want to do. If you want to do something, then fully embrace it. But sometimes we make these little sacrifices. I remember what you told her, Ryan, when she was like, well, I'm going to sacrifice this one little value, but then of course that starts to snowball, and then 10 years down the line you've made all these decisions that are no longer in alignment with the person that you wanted to become.
I can see how that slope is very slippery. So in that example, it's, well, I'm in this job I don't like, so I'm going to start a side hustle. Well, in order for the side hustle to be profitable, I have to have ads on my website, for example, right? Well, if I get rid of the ads, then I have to work more at this job I don't like. And then so there's all these weird choices that start compounding, and then suddenly you feel like you're in prison when really you just made a choice to shut that door, shut that door, shut that door, lock that window, lock that other window. And then you go, look, this wasn't me. Look at my circumstances.
Yeah.
And I was in the same boat. I was like, I can't start over. Well, I could have. It just would have been hard. And I didn't want to go, oh my gosh, look at all the work I have to do. I wanted to go, look at what everyone's doing to me. Poor me. I'm stuck in this situation. It'll be fine. Let me go get a burger or whatever, and just put it out of my mind. And then when I started really clashing with my partners, and the whole deal fell through, the amicable split fell through, and I just got locked out of everything, which is now a lawsuit and everything like that, because of course you can't just lock me out of everything.
Yeah.
But then I had to start over, and I went, oh, okay, now that this choice has been made for me, I'm going to feel sorry for myself for like 15 minutes. Then I'm going to call all my friends and find out what the hell I can do to get out of this mess. Now I'm in a better place than I ever would have been had I stayed at the old company. The Jordan Harbinger show is more popular than the old show, but I never would have found that out because I didn't have the guts to go, maybe I should crack open this door and walk through it and see what happens. But I understand why people don't do it, because it's freaking scary.
Yeah. Well, it's also easier to go with the flow too, man.
Yeah.
But the problem with going with the flow is, well, you eventually end up at the falls.
Yes. Oh, I love that.
Yes, indeed. Well, we've got some questions today. How about we hop into these, and we'll talk a bit more about, well, the business lessons we've learned about starting a business, etc. Our first question today is from Johnny in San Francisco.
I just had a question as to what you guys see as a minimalist business. I've been running a catering / farmers market for the past farmers market booth for the past 3 years, and I'm wondering what you guys think about expansion and taking on debt to expand a business that you are very passionate about. I am also passionate about other things outside of life, outside of the restaurant life, so this is a good thing to be flexible and travel as well without a commitment of a brick and mortar. But to make a living from this, I have to work part-time and do the food booth part-time as well. It's not something that can sustain us for a long period of time without supplemental income.
You know, I think that Johnny is doing something important here, and he's realizing something important. He's asking some good questions here. And I'll say bravo for starting your own business and not trying to take the giant leap of starting a, well, I must do this brick and mortar thing right away. It's not to say that that's the wrong thing to do. Ryan and I actually own a coffee shop, or we're part owners of a coffee shop down in St. Petersburg, Florida. It's a long story, but and it is a minimalist business for sure, and the aesthetic is minimalist, but also the way that we run it is minimalist. So Johnny's asking, how do I run a minimalist business? It kind of depends on what you mean by that. Do you mean like aesthetic minimalism, or in his case, I think he's meaning like the financial side of things. Now, for me, he talked about being passionate about this business. Yeah. And I think that debt can totally kill your passion.
Oh, yeah. And it limits your freedom, too. Yeah. Because if you go, all right, we took on this debt. Well, actually, I'd love to do this other thing. Or like maybe I'd like some free time. Or maybe we want to have kids. Well, can't do that. We owe $350,000 to the bank for this restaurant or this storefront.
And you become indebted to a particular lifestyle or work. Well, now I have to work 80 hours a week. Or I have to do this, as opposed to where you're at right now, Johnny, is I get to do this. I get to do the catering. I get to do the farmer's market. So if I'm defining a minimalist business, for me, 3 things stand out. And I think debt can be maybe the 4th thing here. You strive to be debt-free. I'm not saying it's impossible to run a minimalist business with debt. It just makes it a bit more difficult. Ryan and I don't do do debt at all in our personal life or in our business life, but I could see there are some scenarios where you might take on, you know, you're buying a building or something.
Yeah,
it makes sense.
I will always stand by. There is no such thing as good debt. I mean, it's funny because we say this all the time, and people will like send this really long email, like, well, you know, it's just basically if you have a lot of money, like they'll give the example of Mark Zuckerberg who bought a $50 million house and put it on a loan because he got a 3% interest rate, but he can collect 7% year over year on average with the stock market. And it's like, yes, okay, if you have millions and millions of dollars, maybe in that scenario, it might be smarter to take out a loan. But for all intents and purposes, everyone listening to this, I mean, there is no such thing as good debt.
And by the way, functionally, he doesn't even have debt then.
That's
he
right.
just has the money somewhere else.
Yes.
That's right. For a guy like that, that house could implode and the insurance company could go, look, we are out of business. We can't pay you. And he would go, oh, all right. And his life wouldn't change at all. He'd be annoyed. Right? But if your storefront gets evaporated and you didn't have insurance on it and you still owed that debt, it would crush your life and your well-being, and you would never... Oh, you would take a long time to recover from that.
Yeah,
a long
for sure.
time.
So three things that define a minimalist business to me. One is your actions or the actions of the business align with the values of the business. Now, if you're a entrepreneur, solopreneur, it's probably your values as well. In fact, your business's values shouldn't be different from your own values, or at least appreciably different. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think every good business solves problems, and quite often, people go the other way around. It's kind of what you were talking about earlier. Is like, hey, we have a bunch of solutions. Let's find the problems.
Yeah.
And the one solution was, let's take $1 from people every month, and
just silliness. Yeah.
And so I think every good business or every good creative even helps people solve problems. And the third thing that defines a minimalist business for me is it grows only when it makes sense. I think we're often told that like unlimited growth, we need to grow no matter what. That can be irresponsible. I mean, there are types of bad growth. A tumor is a type of bad growth, and we don't want that in our business, obviously.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I think about, being a minimalist, it's not about just being a monk and shaving your head and like having nothing. I mean,
you
it's
certainly haven't shaven your head. Neither of you guys are interested in that.
No. And that's because, Josh and I, we're not really concerned with the amount of items that people own. It's more about, are people living deliberately? Because we live in such an impulsive society, especially with all the advertisements we see and the pressures from society and success. We got to be successful. I mean, we have all these things that really make us not be so deliberate. So with Johnny here, man, I would say if you can avoid debt, Johnny, avoid the debt. Now, there are some debts that are better than others. Payday loan is going to be much worse than a 7-year fixed mortgage. I mean, there are definitely better debt. There's better debt to get in than others. So, I mean, if Johnny has to get into debt, I don't know, man. How could we help Johnny reason to get in debt? I mean, is there a reason? I guess maybe that's a better quality question.
It goes back to that gal in Dallas, right? Like, if Johnny has to get in debt, then maybe he's lying to himself.
Yeah, or it has to materially affect in a positive way, and this is just my opinion, his quality of life. So if he hates that he has to work part-time, and the bottleneck is his personal time, and he would love to run a brick and mortar business, and he thinks that's going to be great, but he would need a loan to do it, that's something to consider. But if he's just going, all my friends say that I should grow this business, or I feel humiliated having to work part-time, then we're talking about ego issues. Definitely not a good reason to borrow $300,000 from Chase, right? It reminds me of this parable. You guys have probably said this 1,000 times on the show, so stop me if you have. There's this guy, this executive flies down, and there's a guy fishing, and he goes out and fishes, and he goes, hey, if you just worked a little harder, instead of just fishing all day, you could buy another boat, and then you could buy another boat, and then everybody else could be fishing all day, and you could work a couple of years of 80-hour weeks, and then you'd own the company, and then you could just retire and fish all day. And the guy's like, yeah, that's what I'm doing, right? And I sort of butchered this parable, but the idea is people work really, really, really hard, and they're ending up doing the exact same thing in retirement as they could do now.
Yeah.
The difference, of course, is if he hates what he's doing now because there's elements that he could get out of with a couple of years of hard work and a little bit of debt, then yes. But if you're just praying that the stars align and you don't fail, which is what a lot of brick and mortar food or restaurant businesses are, you're just rolling the dice, and it can be really dangerous, because then you have the debt, but then you're working 3 part-time jobs and you're doing the farm cart and you don't get to keep the money. It's going back to Chase.
Yeah.
Well, according to Forbes, I was just reading this recently in preparation for this. There's when 90% of businesses fail in the first 5 years, and we hear this similar stat all the time, and that is, I think, both bad news and good news.
Yeah.
The good news is if you fail, you can move on, start something else. The good news is that a lot of other people are failing, and you can learn from their lessons as well.
Yeah.
And so if you look at people who have taken whatever template, the farmer's market thing, or if you wanted to start a brick and mortar store, you can look at that template and say, what have people done well? What have people done poorly? I remember when I first left the corporate world, I was 30 years old, and it was after 12 years in telecom, and I managed 150 retail stores.
Oh my gosh.
Which I know is really ironic with the whole minimalism
Well,
thing.
yeah, I mean, this is pre-minimalism, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And well, toward the end of it, as when I first embraced minimalism, Ryan and I were both in the corporate world working at the same telecom company, and I realized like this didn't align with the person I wanted to be, and I just wanted to go write fiction. I'd written fiction throughout my 20s. That was the thing I wanted to do, and I had people at work, like when I finally decided to quit, I put in several months' notice, had a whole transition plan, and people came up to me and said, but where are you really going? Like, they thought I was going to a competitor or something, right? Because
Take me with you.
yeah, and I'm like, I can't, I'm just going to go write. And I had more than one person say, if anyone could just quit their job and be a writer, everyone would do it. And I'm like, you realize there are some people who make a living from writing, right?
Yeah.
This is the first time this has ever happened.
That's right.
And but what I realized is that there is a template. People earn a living from doing what I wanted to do, and I could find several different recipes, tweeze out the ingredients that work for me, learn from other people's failures, and that's because a lot of people do fail along the way to success. And so maybe we can talk about some of the failures that you've gone through, Jordan, in the past that have gotten you to the successes that you have right now.
Yeah, I think every time I think something is successful and then I look back at it later, I'm like, well, there's a little asterisk next to it where it's like, that didn't quite work out the way I wanted it to. And I'm not one of those everything happens for a reason type of guys, but I am one of those you can take a lesson from anything type of guys.
Yeah.
So when I look back, it makes it, that's a good idea, by the way, because it makes it really hard to regret stuff. It makes it really hard to regret stuff if you focus on the lesson that you get from things, which I know is easier said than done, because this isn't a fortune cookie where you can just be like, oh, there's a lesson in everything? Good, I don't feel bad about any of my decisions now. I mean, I wish that were the case, but when I look back at, let's say, starting a business that was focused around dating and relationships, that was not the ideal business for me to start because I quickly lost interest in that. And what I was really interested in was human behavior. But starting a vaguely human behavior related business was not really something that was going to work for me. But my biggest quote unquote failure is probably the idea that I went to college, tried to get a job at Best Buy, couldn't really get a computer repair job. They wanted me to sell CDs, and I was like standing next to a life-size cutout of Britney Spears and just being like, what happened to my life after a 4-year degree from the University of Michigan? And then I went to law school because I thought, well, the solution to this problem is more education,
Right.
which, speaking of debt, is basically the same thing. Going to law school or grad school in general, because you feel like you don't have enough education and not because you're interested in the topic, is the worst idea. But it makes sense if you look at our parents' generation, because half of them, or more than half, probably didn't even go to college. So it was like, hey, if you go to college, you're going to get a great job. Well, if you extrapolate from that, if you go to grad school, you're going to get a better job than people who just went to college, who are going to get better jobs than people who just went to high school. Now, though, the part they don't tell you, grad school at a really top school is probably like $150,000 for 3 years. So that, speaking of limiting your freedom, I was like, I don't even want to be a lawyer, but I'm going to get this great legal education. And then towards the end, I got job offers from Wall Street, and I was like, no way, man. I'm going to do my own thing. I might work for the government because then I can go travel and do all this cool stuff. And it's like, here's what you're going to get paid from the government. Here's what you're going to get paid on Wall Street. Oh, and by the way, your level of debt, if you work for the government, you're going to pay it off in 87 years. And if you work for Wall Street, you can pay it off in like 5 years. And it was like, oh, cool. Well, I'm only going to work on Wall Street as long as I need to. And then you start doing the math and you're like, 4 years when you're 27 is a long time. And you keep going and you keep going. And this is not news for you two guys from coming from corporate. You get these golden handcuffs. And I luckily avoided this because the economy took a huge dive.
Yeah.
But guys that had started a couple years before me, they're working on Wall Street and they're like, oh yeah, well, I'm gonna get a boat because that boats are cool, and I'm really bored of my job, and I can then go to this boat every weekend. And then they're like, well, I should just get a house in the Hamptons and park my boat there. And and then I'm gonna get married and have kids. And well, my wife doesn't want to take a lifestyle hit, and
endless.
she's taking care of the kids. So you got these, we call them golden handcuffs, because it looks like your life is awesome. But then if you wake up one day and you go, I am sick of this corporate BS, then you go, well, wait a minute, 2 mortgages, a boat, 2 kids, I've got to take care of my family. And that's if you were responsible, right? Imagine the guys who just bought a bunch of shoes. Like, those guys are totally screwed.
Right? They got no assets. Remember every time someone in our that worked with us, when they would get a house or they would get a car, like our boss, he would be like, keep getting buried in debt, because he knew that he could treat that person worse. He could put them through the ringer because they were beholden to that paycheck to pay all the debt payments.
Like, you're getting overtime. Everybody's getting overtime.
I remember
overtime.
The flagship store, that you managed at one point in time in Centerville, Ohio. I pulled up once. I was at the time I was a regional manager for like 16 stores, and I pulled up in my Lexus, and one of 2, and I pulled up, and there were 2 Hummers, a Corvette, and a Mercedes. And these were all frontline retail employees.
Yeah.
What?
I know, right?
Weren't Hummers like 70 grand back in the day?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
What on earth is going on here?
Well, right. Massive amounts of unsustainable debt is what was going on.
Yeah, I'm
they're like, I made a few good commission checks. I can prove that I can afford the debt payment on this thing.
Right.
And this was also at peak insanity. Peak insanity being like, well, we can stretch this to a 63-month term, and you can afford to pay pay for this Hummer with your retail job as long as no other emergency ever happens in your life over the next 63 months. Then you'll own this Hummer.
63 months. And they do the months thing because every number after 12, you're like, okay, right? Like, you're like, that's a year, and then you're like, wait, 63, holy crap!
Might as well be 100 months.
Yeah,
right.
My kids are gonna be driving this thing.
Yeah, exactly. And so the one other stat that's worth talking about, our friend TK Coleman, he's doing these series that sort of against the arguments. I think he calls it the bad college argument tour. He's going out to like colleges and like dealing with people's best objections about why should you get into debt to go to college, and there are some good objections out there. One is like, well, that people who on average, people with a as you just said, people with a degree earn more than people without a degree, which is true on average, but it also conflates causation with correlation there.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, I think the stat was 71% of people with graduate degrees are currently underemployed.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And so you now you have $100,000 worth of debt, and you're doing a job that didn't require the degree that got you into $100,000 worth of debt.
It's probably because 99.9% of graduate schools don't train you for an actual trade, right? That stat I obviously made up. But think about this. If you have a PhD in statistics, you might go to work for a firm that you might become like an insurance executive or something like that, but probably you're going to start off doing something that somebody who has a BA in English is also doing. Right. And I might, whatever, if I got that particular subject area wrong, fine, replace it with any other graduate school subject area that's not engineering, computer engineering, law, medicine, or something that readily prepares you for an actual job. So if you're going to be a doctor, yeah, you got to borrow some dough, but you're going to be a physician. You're going to get employment somewhere.
Right.
But if you're going and you're like, I just really love, I'm trying not to say English, but that's the first one that comes to mind that is quote unquote useless. You're going to end up with the same job as somebody else who just has a basic college degree in almost every case, unless you are really crafty.
And the reason that we get there is we're told that, well, in order to be successful, you need to go to college and get this underwater bubblegum chewing degree.
Right.
And now
you can chew bubblegum underwater, and now you can be a barista.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's where we end up. And then you start looking like where Johnny is right now, and you say, okay, in order for me to feel free, I need to start my own thing. I need to have. I want to do my own thing because of the job that I'm working. It's no longer fulfilling. It's not satisfying. And I guess the last bit of advice I would have for Johnny is, part of it has to do with a plan, but you've already figured out what direction you want to go in. Now the question is, how can you get there and still make it something that you love doing.
Yeah.
A few months ago, Ryan, we did a podcast episode with Paul Johnson from a band called Canyon City, and one of our favorite musicians, and he actually opened up for us this summer on tour. And one of the things that he did is he messed up. When he first moved to Nashville to do music, he signed this big recording contract and started doing like all these jingles for Coca-Cola and stuff. And
well, I mean, it was like
not too bad.
Yeah, and he finally made it, man. Like he had, someone offering him money. He's a paid musician, so that was his goal, and that's
he hated it. And it turned the thing that he loved into this thing that he hated because he was now beholden.
Jobs will do that.
Yeah.
You turn your hobby into it. People are always like, then I can be a professional XYZ. And I'm like, ooh.
That's a really good way to kill your passion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really, really good way to destroy the one thing that you enjoy doing in the world.
So maybe to sum it up is, I think a minimalist business never puts money first, but also we have to keep in mind that money is going to be part of the equation. We'd be lying to ourselves if you're running a business saying, I don't need to make money.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. It's just when it becomes the primary driver for doing what we do, that's when it kills our creativity, it kills our passion, and it kills our life.
Yeah. I really like what you said. The advice you had for Johnny is like, ask himself why he wants to open this up. Why does he want to take out this debt? And then Josh, to your point about, does this align with the person that he wants to become? So Johnny, ask yourself why it is that you want to grow your business, and does it align with the person that you want to become? What I'll say though, I mean, no matter what, I mean, whether Johnny takes out debt or not, I hope he can avoid it. But regardless, as long as he has a plan, and as long as he's working in that plan and it doesn't go against his values, I mean, he's probably on the right track.
Yeah. I think one last tip, if I may, is do not quit that part-time job that you have, Johnny, until you're the bottleneck in whatever it is and you can't outsource anything else. Because there's this trend among entrepreneurs now, and they're YouTubers and Instagrammers that are like, quit your job, go all in. And I'm like, wait a minute, did you follow that advice? First of all, probably not. Secondly, why do that? You're burning the ships for absolutely no reason. You're adding a ton of stress. What, so you can tell your mom, like, look, I'm a full-time entrepreneur. I don't even have a regular job now. Fine. Why, though?
Right.
Why? You're just adding stress. Keep that part-time job, because if things go downhill and you hit a slow season, or, oh my gosh, the supplier screwed us over and now the money's gone and we're waiting for them to refund it, but we didn't get the product, you can probably scale up those part-time hours and survive. And you don't have to worry about it. People go, oh, I'm quitting my job. What are you doing all day? Well, I have social media to take care of. I've got this to take care of. If you work at Taco Bell and you're making $15 an hour, fine, quit your job, do it yourself. If you have a job that's paying you a decent wage and it's not killing you, like literally, keep it, and then hire someone else to do that social media, which, by the way, has like zero ROI for your business.
Absolutely.
And then have them do it. And then when you find that you just can't outsource anything else anymore because it's the amount of finite energy that you have to do whatever it is you specialize in. You know, it makes sense for you guys not to have corporate jobs and to do your shows and to create all the films and all the podcasts that you're creating. Only you can do that. But if you're sitting there answering all your tweets and it's taking you 4 hours a day, pay Jordan to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
He'll do it.
Yeah, and we outsourced that years ago, and I think you brought up a really good point with the social media thing. Our friend Matt Diavella, who directed our documentary Minimalism that's on Netflix, he did this 30-day fast recently. I've been telling him for over a year, like, that exactly what you just said. Hey, there's very little ROI, and that there's some value you can gain from it. But if you're looking at it as the primary driver for your creativity, man, that is misspent time. And I'll tell you, very recently, since he walked away from social media, he has been killing it, adding immense value, because he's a genius filmmaker, and so he's doing these little 5 to 10 minute videos on YouTube, and they're all getting millions of views.
Wow.
And
That's great.
and it's from walking away from this thing and adding immense value. So ultimately, whatever Johnny's going to do, or whatever someone listening to this is going to do, you have to remember that adding value to people, minimalist business is people focused, whether it's your customers or clients or readers or viewers or listeners, but also the people you work with, and being people focused, creating an outstanding experience for the people you work with, but creating outstanding quality of whatever you're producing for the people that you're solving their problems.
Do you guys find that social media was bad for you when you were doing it?
I mean, social media helps spread the message because, I mean, you know, it turns out Facebook is where a lot of stuff is happening. So it's a great vehicle to use for certain aspects of the minimalists to kind of spread, you know, our story, to spread our message. Twitter is more, we use it for different reasons. But I think that is what we've done with social media is we will take Twitter, we'll take Facebook, we're on Instagram, and we will use each vehicle deliberately. It's not like we send out a tweet and then it goes to our Facebook and then it goes to our Instagram.
Yeah.
Each vehicle is used for a different reason. So I think it does. I mean, personally, I don't have a personal Facebook account because that does nothing for me.
Sure.
But as far as the minimalists go, I feel like it does add a lot of value to a lot of people, and it is a way to kind of get our word out there.
I think that, so at the beginning of the year, we took a step back and we were doing just that. We realized like the definition of insanity is doing, you know, the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. We were doing that. We were like posting everything in triplicate, where it was like, well, here's our Twitter post. Let's repost that on Facebook and repost it on Instagram.
I was doing that too.
And
doesn't work.
And so at the beginning of the year, Jessica, who runs our social media, and she's really amazing, really talented artist. In fact, she used to curate like museums and galleries.
Wow.
And so she's a curator of things, and she does a really good job of this. And so at the beginning of the year, we literally deleted all of our social media. I went back, she deleted all the tweets, all the Instagram photos, started with a blank slate. And we came up with a new plan. Like, we're only going to use Instagram for beautiful photos that will add value to people with like these short captions that Ryan and I write. Facebook is great for sharing links and articles, right? Twitter is great for sharing only text. We don't share any links or any photos on Twitter. And by creating these arbitrary restrictions, we've been a lot more creative using those platforms. But using those to augment what we're already creating, they're not the main creation.
That makes sense. For me, I just found as a creator, it sort of started to drain me, especially Instagram, because I was like, oh, I have to make a video now. Oh, wait, it's over a minute. I've got to rewrite it. And I was just like, why am I doing this instead of making a show that people actually care about? Why am I trying to figure out how to shoehorn my creativity into this format? And I agree, the formats are important to get the message out, but beyond that, I just didn't want to become an Instagram influencer.
Right.
I wanted to just do the show. And I found, surprisingly, YouTube, which I usually hated, is actually really fun. Like what we're doing right now, filming the show and repurposing it this way and having people see how we interact, that's been much more fun. But trying to figure out like, hey, quick, speak faster, only we're going to do this as a selfie and then give a quick tip. It's just, it sort of made me tired by 11 a.m. and I didn't want to do anything else.
Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to force it, it's definitely going to be tiring. I mean, yeah, the other thing with social media too is it can feel like it's productive. Like you can feel like you're getting a lot of work done. Totally. Same thing with email. It's like you can spend, 6 hours making the perfect Instagram video, catching up on all your emails, putting the perfect tweet out there, crafting the perfect Facebook message. But at the end of the day, it's like, what did you really get done?
Yeah, guilty.
Right.
Are you familiar with our friend?
I think we
Cal
all are a little
Newport?
bit.
Of course, Cal.
So he's got a new book coming out called Digital Minimalism.
I was wondering if you guys are going to jump on that.
And he's we've done a few events with him in the past, and he's like, he's never been on social media, but exactly what Ryan's talking about here. Those things ape the form of productivity. So by the end of the day, you're like, I'm exhausted. I did so many tweets and responded to so many bullshit
What a
emails.
productive day.
Look at all these likes I got.
Yeah.
Do you see how many emails lists I unsubscribed from? I'm so productive.
Yeah.
And that's what it feels like, but you're not actually creating the thing you set out to create.
Right.
Johnny, I'd love to send you a copy of our book, Minimalism, Live a Meaningful Life. So we talked about aligning your business with your values. Well, in order to do that, you need to figure out what your values are. So let me see if I got, here we go. Here is the book. Podcast Sean, if you could reach out to Johnny, send him an audiobook version of Minimalism. It talks about the 5 higher order values, what we call the foundational values in our life, and setting those up. Too often, we take actions that our everyday actions don't align with the person that we want to become. And so, of course, we say, well, my health's a priority. My relationships are a priority. Contributing to my community, it's definitely a priority. But then you list what you've done in the last 24 hours, and I certainly have been guilty of this, and you're like, wow, all of the things that I've done didn't do anything for my values. Those are actually just lip service priorities.
Oh, man. I feel like you see me. Yeah. Damn it.
Well, I mean, we're all that way
to
a certain extent. So our book, Minimalism, Live a Meaningful Life, we're going to send you a copy of that, Johnny. Either the audiobook, if you like our podcast, you'll like the audiobook, or if you want the book or the ebook, we're happy to send those to you as well. Our next question is from Tammy in St. Petersburg, Florida, where we own our coffee shop.
Yeah.
I've been simplifying other aspects of my personal life. I really want to be able to carry this over within my business practices as a portrait photographer. Something that I've always struggled with is keeping my pricing uncomplicated while still providing myself with the opportunity for potential additional profits that allow me to sustain a quality of life that I desire. It seems that almost everything you see or read out there with regards to marketing and sales advice these days are all about the potential upsell. So to do this within this industry, you generally create different packages, tiers, or add-ons, and this is how you make it happen. But I feel that this starts to overwhelm my clients, and honestly, it kind of overwhelms myself as well. So the easiest thing for me to do would be to give people what they want and in an easy fashion. And with probably 90% of clients wanting digitals, charging a fee for my time, artistic skills, and then the digital seems like the logical way to go. But this shoot and burn tactic, as the photography industry lovingly calls it, can make it really hard to sustain a profit because many of my clients, they just don't understand the value of these digital files to us as a photographer. It's basically my original piece of art. They are what I invest my most of my time on, and once the client receives these files, they have the option for endless usage and printing rights for their personal use. So what I would need to charge in order to allow myself a sustainable quality of life, I would probably cause some serious sticker shock to most and probably lose a lot of clients. So I guess what I'm asking is, do you have any suggestions with how to simplify this sales process for me and still allow myself to make a profit?
I think ultimately, if I were to rephrase Tammy's question here, is as a business or a business owner, how do I simplify my pricing in the best way so that I'm making an income and also I'm adding value to the people around me? And she talked about some ways with upsells and add-ons. In the corporate world, back in the cell phone days, Ryan, we used to call them bolt-ons. And in fact, Ryan and I were in charge of measuring every single day, twice a day, these 29 metrics that our stores were performing on. And so we always had something to beat our employees up with, because they could be doing really well in 28, and it'd be like, how dare you not sell this product?
How dare only 20% of your new accounts have text messaging on it?
Right.
It should be more like 50%.
Shouldn't it be 100% now?
I mean, I guess not. Yeah, now it should be.
Back in the day, this is before text messaging.
Well, I think there's something else going on here with Tammy too. Is she is, as a photographer, and especially in this digital world, it is it's very hard to keep your own artistic creations to yourself. Right. So I think there's a little bit of that going on. I mean, what I would say when it comes to the intellectual property, if I went to a photographer, so I'm looking at it from the customer standpoint. If I went to a photographer and I asked them to take some portraits of me,
which you have done. I mean, we do as the Minimalists.
Right. So they take the picture of me. I paid them to have the picture. They send me the digitals. Those are my digitals that I paid the photographer to create for me.
Right.
And now if the photographer wants to use, my portrait in a portfolio or just to display what she's capable of doing, great. But ultimately that photographer doesn't own that. That photographer can't sell my face to McDonald's and say, oh yeah, I got a great picture of a person here that would look great for this campaign that you're looking to do. Right. And I think maybe there's a little bit of that going on. Am I wrong?
Well, yeah, I think so. I think sometimes we're very precious. Everything is precious to us.
Yeah.
And, well, I mean, think about your old business, right? Yeah. One of the reasons you didn't want to let it go is because I built this and it is precious to me. Well, and then when something becomes too precious, that to me is a sign that I need to maybe not let go, but at least loosen my grip a little bit.
That's an interesting point. It's very minimalist to think that you should let that go, that's a sign that you should let go. Whereas you're right. one of the hardest things of letting go with the old business is, but what about all those recordings of my voice? As far as I know, I kind of have an unlimited reserve of the ability to talk. And if you ask my wife, she'll confirm that, right? So like, what's the big deal? Those things happen in the past. If you're an NBA player and you play a game and you're watching a replay of that game on ESPN 17 or whatever, are you like, that's mine?
Yeah.
No, you're like, that's a thing that happened and now it's over.
Yeah.
And so the word complex, the root of that word is complex, and it means to bind two things together.
Didn't know that.
And so right now what she's saying is a lot of photographers, they complex their businesses. They make it more complex by having a complex pricing structure. Yeah. And if you want to, the opposite of complex is singular, simplify. And if you just want, I mean, to me as a customer, let's talk about this, Ryan. So actually the people we started our coffee shop with, Joshua and Sarah Weaver, are two really talented photographers. That's how we met them. They did the photos for all of our books. Mm-hmm. And so when we brought them out to do some photos, they were talking about opening this coffee shop. They were both working for like these digital marketing agencies, sure. And they were like, we're kind of burnt out on this. We want to do our own thing, showcase our own creativity in a different way. And we built a really great relationship with them because they came out to take some photos of us for some books, and we quickly became friends. So you'll also learn that whatever you're doing might lead to something else when you're building these relationships with clients. They'll lead to referrals and everything else. But we went to them and they came to us with a price. Here is your price. If you want some photos, you can use them for whatever you want, for books, etc. And we got to say yes or no to that price. Right. And they felt like they were getting what they deserved. I mean, they may have felt like their photography is worth millions of dollars. I don't know. Right. But the market dictated, here's the price. We're really great photographers. We're going to come out and we're going to do this for 2 days. Here's what we're going to charge you. Yeah,
I think really what you're laying out here, Josh, is that the photographer is very aware of what the subject is going to do with the photos, and there's an agreement worked out between the two of them. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I've got 5 things written down here. I mean, when it comes specifically to the pricing model, like you can basically charge, you can do whatever pricing model you want. Like if you're adding value to your subjects and your work is outstanding, like that's really what's important, right? Yeah. Like, yeah. So it doesn't really matter like what you're charging or what your pricing model looks like. I mean, with Sarah and Josh specifically, it's like we went to them because we wanted their creativity, because we knew of their work. Mm-hmm. And the pricing was kind of, I mean, it's important. It's something to consider, but we weren't just shopping price.
Right.
So
and so if you're just focused on price, it's going to be a race to the bottom. And,
yes.
You don't want those clients.
And if you're and if you're advertising price, it's a race to the bottom.
And so I think quite often, if you simplify the pricing structure, if you remove this complexity, I mean, one way that we used to do it in the corporate world, if people do want choices, they don't want unlimited choices, though. There's a reason if you walk into a IKEA, you feel really overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And so they want, a good, better, best, perhaps.
Right, which is a great approach.
Yeah, and so you can lay out, well, here are the 3 pricing tiers, here's what you get for that, or maybe you can just go to a client and say, here's what I charge. Here's and it includes all of this stuff. I'm not going to give you any add-ons, bolt-ons, whatever. Mm-hmm. Here's what I include in my service.
Yeah, and that's really the second point that I wrote down. As long as your clients understand exactly what your pricing includes. Again, it doesn't. If you do a good, better, best, and let's say that is totally, not the norm in the photography world. That's okay. You can do it differently as long as your clients, the people coming to you, know exactly what you're charging and what they're getting for what you're charging. The worst thing, she talks about the bolt-ons and the upsells and stuff. Nothing pisses me off more.
Oh, I was gonna say that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Go ahead.
No. I mean, nothing pisses me off more when I go to buy something and they're like, oh yeah, you wanted to take this home with you. Well, the taking it home charge, I got to charge you an extra $50.
Exactly.
I mean, that's never a good customer experience, man.
Yeah, having the convenience fee when you buy tickets.
Oh, right. So irritating. As a business owner, I have photos taken all the time. If you're like, hey, I'm $150, and another person's like, I'm $350. Let's say for some reason the work looks similar to me. I will still go, well, wait a minute. If the $150 photographer is like, oh, but then I have to come to you and I charge per mile, so that's going to end up being $47. And then, oh, you want to use it commercially? Okay, so that's an additional $100. If I start having to stack the math together, and then the $350 person's like, oh, you live 20 miles away? Not a problem. Yeah, you want the whole day? That's fine.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I got to bring an assistant. That I will pay him $50, so I'll charge you $50. Fine. But if I start having to go, let me get the calculator out, and I'm going, oh, it's kind of this, that. I don't want to screw with the person who's going to save me $50, but then maybe there's this other thing I'm not expecting later. I'll just pay for the person who told me the one price or the two prices, because I just don't care enough. You don't want clients that are going to split hairs over $15 or even $150 if they're going to pay you $2,000. Just charge me the full amount. I've paid photographers $5,000. I've paid photographers $150. There's a difference in quality, but if we ignore that, fine. I still want the guy who's going to go, yeah, you're getting 100 photos. They're all retouched. The end. I don't want someone who's like, each photo's $20. What if I want more than that? Just simple. There's something to be said for the client understanding exactly what they're getting, and that is worth money.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think you can differentiate yourself not by being the cheapest. I mean, that's one way to differentiate yourself, but you're going to get the cheap clients too. And the way, and maybe it's fine to do that up front. You can do free portfolio work up front, but that's not where Tammy is at this point. You can build a portfolio, and you can go out of your way to do a bunch of stuff for free to add value to people, which is going to build up your clientele, referrals, etc. long term. Ryan and I, the 99% of what we do and 99% of what you do, Jordan, is free. And in order to do that, we make money elsewhere, whether it's selling books or we have Patreon, etc. But the way we differentiate ourselves isn't by being cheaper. We differentiate ourselves by being better or simpler, and I think that's what Tammy can do here. Differentiate yourself not by being cheaper. Differentiate yourself by being better and simpler than your competition.
Absolutely. And you know what, man? Just thinking of that $150 photographer versus a $350 photographer. So the $150, they're going to have all these bolt-ons and upsells. Who are you more likely to recommend to your friends and family?
Yeah, hey, it's $350 and you get all the stuff everything. You're imagining.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it sounds like the bolt-ons. It's not going to generate more business. What you're doing is you're sucking them in with a low price, and then you're adding all of these things on, and that just doesn't create a very good customer experience. The other thing too, man, the third thing I've written down is being consistent. Like, just consistency is key too. So if you got a good, better, best, and you send me a photographer and you're like, for $350, this is what I got, and this is what you're gonna get. Well, then you've got that photographer has to be $350 for every single person. I mean, people, they want, when someone is looking for a service, or I always say, like, when I go onto a car lot, like, I want to be sold. Like, it's sales is not a nasty thing. It's only nasty when we start looking at, oh, how can we put $1 on their credit card without them expecting it? How can we do these bolt-ons and sneak those in there? I mean, that is where that is where you could really kill your reputation and kill your business.
It's like what Derek Sivers often talks about when he did an event with us in New Zealand earlier this year, and the thing that he writes about is, good marketing is actually just being considerate.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And so if we're being considerate to the people that we are selling to, so good selling in a way is being considerate, keeping in mind the needs. What problem are you solving for that person? Well, in Tammy's case, it's easy. This person needs photos. They need high quality photos, and they want to do something with those photos. And then you need to be willing to go to them with your price and charge them whatever you feel your time and your product is worth.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And the other thing too is, like, Tammy, she mentioned, like, well, the sticker shock is going to drive clients away. Yeah. But the thing is like, I don't think that should scare Tammy, because let's say she's $700. She's twice as much as someone else. But if the fourth thing I've written down is she can prove to her clients why she's the photographer they need, and actually to the fifth point that I've written down, that she understands the client's needs, she can charge whatever she wants.
Exactly.
So Tammy, don't be scared to put your own pricing matrix out there. Don't be scared to go against the norm of what other photographers are doing. You've just got to make sure that you are being consistent, that you are your clients understand why they want you as a photographer, and they want to make sure that you understand their needs. If you're doing that, I mean, that's adding a ton of value.
Yeah.
Like, that is how she's going to be successful this time.
She's right. It's going to drive some clients away. That's the idea. You want to drive away the person who's like, what? I went to Sears and I got photos for my kids for $89. What's this all about? You want $400? Yeah, I'm not the person at Sears. This is better. Here's why. And you get digitals, and you get this, and you get this, and you get this. You're not going to get that from Sears. And look at what you get. What you get from Sears is layers and your kids leaning on a ladder, right? Like this. Like, when you do work with me, I come to you, we do this location stuff, it's going to look a lot better. And if they go, nah, they don't want your service. They want a commoditized version of photography.
I don't know. I can get glamour shots for half the price.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's so back to Derek Sivers again. Proudly exclude 99% of people so you can focus your talents on the 1%.
Right.
Absolutely.
Like, you're not selling this book to people who just need something to read, right? This is for people who want to make changes in their lives based on whatever the book is about, like getting rid of things or decluttering or whatever it happens to be, or clearing their thinking, right? It's not a book. I don't need to buy a book to learn how to throw stuff away. You probably get that in your inbox here and there, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's not what the book is about. If you want a book on how to throw stuff away, or you just want to do it for free, go ahead. You're not our customer, and you have to be okay with it.
I had someone come up to one of our events in 2014, and they were like, you know, you guys talked for like 2 hours up there, but aren't you guys really just saying to live intentionally and to live up to your values and beliefs? And I'm like, yeah, I guess. And they're like, well, why do this whole tour? And I'm like, try tweeting that and see what kind of response you get.
Yeah, exactly. Anything else, Ryan, before we move on past Tammy's question here?
What are we going to give Tammy?
Let's give her, I'm going to give her two things. We'll give her a copy of our book, Everything That Remains. It's sort of the 5-year journey of Ryan and I walking away from the corporate world and walking towards something that did align with our values and you know, starting the Minimalist. This whole thing was a real beautiful accident. Like I said, I just wanted to be a fiction writer, and then I'd simplified my life. Ryan noticed like these changes in my life and how I was happier, even though like some pretty traumatic events happened in my life.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, my mom died, my marriage ended, right? And so like I started dealing with those through simplifying my life. And Ryan was like, oh, that's cool. I'm going to get rid of all my shit too. And then we started writing about
good
it.
Idea.
So in 2010,
keeping the hair though, keeping the hair.
Yeah,
Yes,
right. Actually, I became a
strangely.
minimalist and grew the hair.
Yeah.
And I have less hair now.
You do.
Yeah,
Well,
so
we all do.
it's very strange. All right. So you know what? I'm going to send Tammy a copy of this book because it talks about like moving away from the perception of how things should be and moving toward how we want things to be. But also, Podcast Sean, if you could send her a copy of Derek Sivers' book. It's a book called Anything You Want.
Have you read that book by chance?
I haven't read that one. No.
It's like 80-something pages.
You can read it in an hour. I think the audiobook's actually an hour.
Audiobook's like it might be 45 minutes.
That's good. I
so
will get
good.
that. What's it called?
It's called Anything You Want by Derek Sivers, and
Yeah.
it truly is like one of the best, if not the best book I've ever read on business.
I like Derek.
Yeah,
Smart guy.
Yeah, and he. It's funny how the whole book's about CD Baby. But like you can, every bit of information, every little tip that he gives you that he did with CD Baby, like you can transfer that to any other business pretty much.
I feel like the whole book is tweetable. Like he wrote it in a way that is very zen, but that's just how Derek is.
Yeah,
so,
he is kind of like that.
So Sean, if you could reach out to Tammy, send her a copy of Everything That Remains, either the audiobook or the book or the ebook, and send her a copy of Anything You Want by Derek Sivers. And of course, if you're listening to this at home or on the treadmill or in your car or wherever you are, we'd love to hear what you have to say. So if you have a comment or tip about business, including starting your own business, what have you learned? Or advice for any of our callers today, leave us a voicemail, 406-219-7839. You can also email a voice memo to podcast@theminimalists.com. We'll air our favorite comments and tips on a future episode. And stay tuned to the end of this episode for this week's listener comments and tips. It's my favorite part of the show because we just steal people's comments and tips and repurpose them later as our own empirical wisdom.
I'm just imagining someone calling in right now on a treadmill trying to leave us a question. I was just listening to your podcast.
Guys, I run a treadmill business. All right, Ryan, what time is it?
You know what time it is? It's time for our lightning round where we answer questions from social media.
Indeed,
nice.
Indeed we do. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The Minimalists. During the lightning round, Jordan, this is where Ryan and I, and now you, we each do our best to answer every question with just a short, shareable, less than 140 character response.
Oh man.
But don't worry, we wander on a bit, and then we'll wrap it up with a tweetable bow.
Cool. Okay.
And so you can find all of these, we call them minimal maxims. You can find them in the show notes, so you can copy and share our pithy answers on social media if you like, or you can find all of our minimal maxims in one place now over at minimalmaxims.com.
Alrighty, our first lightning round question is from Nick. What's the best way to balance hustle and rest while growing a business? should you hustle hard from the start so you can relax in the future? Dude, when I was reading this question, I thought it was funny. So when you're an entrepreneur, like, I don't think you ever relax.
No, I don't even know what that word means anymore.
Oh my
it's
God.
like an academic term.
Well, you know what's funny, man, is like I was talking to Mariah about this the other day. I'm like, because I've been having such a hard time sleeping lately. Like I got the Oura ring, like trying to track my sleep and get better sleep. And I realized like there's always this constant pressure on me for, us owning our own business. Now it's a pressure that I really enjoy having.
Yeah.
But as an entrepreneur, I don't think you could ever truly just like sit back and relax.
I'm always jealous of the 9-to-5ers. I know that sounds weird, but I'm like, wow, so you just went home on Friday and you just didn't look at your email at all?
You just left you just left your work
That's amazing.
over there. Oh wow, yeah, I totally agree.
But here's the thing: when we were in the corporate world, we weren't 9-to-5ers, although people think that.
We were more like 5 to 9ers.
Yeah, beyond 9, really. Like it was. So the very first thing I did in the morning was check my BlackBerry when I woke up at 4:44 every morning.
Hipster.
I would wake up, I'd write for an hour, and then I would start my day. And first thing I do though is check the BlackBerry and make sure there's no emergencies. And the last thing I did before my head hit the pillow was check the BlackBerry. Sure. And I was checking it every minute, it seemed like, of every day. And you know what? What do I have to show for that? Well, I developed some skills along the way, but also I was developing products and services for someone else that I wasn't necessarily benefiting directly from, right? I wasn't building up these assets. I was building up some skills for sure. Yeah. And so I had to think about it in a way where I was hustling for someone else. Yeah. And I, in a weird way, was being hustled.
Yeah, well, that's for sure true.
We
all were.
So if I have a pithy answer for this, it is this. Don't confuse hustle with productivity, creativity, or quality.
Amen.
And if I could have a second pithy answer, podcast Sean, for the show notes here, it's say yes until you have to say no. Then say no until you have to say yes.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
No, you guys are so good at this.
So let's talk about both of those things real quick, Jordan. So I mean, the first thing is, well, we often confuse hustle, the thing we talked about earlier, like I'm GTD, getting things done. But are you really getting things? Are you getting the important things done?
Right. Most people aren't, and I'm just as guilty of this as anyone else. My to-do list. All right. Here's the sign. If you have a to-do list and you put something on it that you've already done just so you can slide it and cross it off, you got a problem, right? You're doing the busy work. And I still sometimes catch myself doing this. I'm like, ooh, I did this thing. I better wait. Midway typing, I'm like, delete. It doesn't need to go in there. You're gamifying the system. You're using Todoist or something like that. Right. You got to be really careful with that. If you try to take these big bites. What is that book called? It's like Eat That Frog. Have you heard of this?
No.
Oh, I can't remember who wrote this. It's called Eat That Frog, and it's about doing the important things in the beginning of the day instead of like, well, first I need to make sure I have no emergencies in my inbox, and then I need to make sure that I go and buy turnips, whatever, at the store, and then I need to feed my cat, and then I'm going to make these calls, and then
busy work.
Right, it's busy work, and you throw things in the way, and this is a subconscious process where you go, I really need to do the book cover because the designer's waiting for this thing that I got to do, and it's bottlenecking this whole project. And you go, but I have all these other things to do because you don't know what you're doing. And when I teach networking and relationship development to either special forces or corporate people or whatever, they're always like, oh, it's a low priority. They don't say that, but they indicate it. And the reason is because it's a black box. It's like, I don't really know how to do this, but I do know how to tweet, and I know how to answer Instagram comments, and I do know how to craft an email for my list that doesn't need to go out, and I know how to tweak crap on my website. You push things to the bottom that are important because they're harder. And so it takes more cognitive ability to do it. So you push it to the end of the day and you go, oh, well, I don't have time, but look at all these other things I did today.
And you're depleted. You're depleted by the end of the day, so you can't even focus on the important thing. And then the saying yes, I mean, at first, especially when you're first starting a business, and that's why I phrase it this way, say yes until you have to say no. Like, you can accept all these new opportunities. It's brand new. Eventually, though, you're going to get to a point. I think Ryan and I have done 4 interviews all year this year, and we've said no to hundreds of them. Well, Sean has said no to hundreds of them.
Good job, Sean.
And the reason that we have said no is because we want to focus on what we're creating right now. There will be another time where it makes sense for us to go out like we did in 2014 and
we'll
do
have to say yes.
400
or it would
interviews.
make sense for us to say yes. We don't have to do anything, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. When does it make sense? And so for like Tammy, when she had her question earlier, Tammy from St. Pete, yeah, she might have the opportunity right now to say yes to a bunch of clients at a lower price to build up her clientele, build up her referrals. But eventually, she's going to get so many clients, her price is going to go up, and she's going to have to start saying no, 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 until it makes sense for her to say yes to the right opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And the dangerous thing is that the social media, the Facebook, the emails, the phone calls, going and buying turnips, like this can feel like a hustle. And you know what? Actually, it might even, you could consider it a hustle. So
A worthless hustle.
Right. So here's my pithy answer for Nick here. An entrepreneur needn't focus on hustling as much as adding value.
Yes.
Like that's, people always ask like, oh man, I want to do this one, so I got this side hustle and I want to really break out. And you guys are entrepreneurs. Like what's your biggest piece of advice? And like our biggest piece of advice is add value. Like if you are adding value to people's lives, just like we do with 99% of our free content, people are willing to support you with that 1% of stuff that you charge for. People are going to find ways to go out of their way and support you.
Yes, indeed.
All right. Our next question is from Bob. How does one overcome the fear of insecurity of moving from the safety net of guaranteed income to the mentality that they can succeed and survive on one's own?
Well, I think we kind of alluded to this. My short answer is job security is a misnomer when your security is in someone else's hands.
Amen.
And I think quite often, like, so you're on Wall Street and you're like, well, this is job security. I've got the job that I want now. But then what happens? The stock market crashes. And all of a sudden, that security you thought you had, that's the rug has been pulled out from under you. And now you're falling because you didn't create that security. It was a sense of false security. And the real security comes when you're willing to step back and realize I'm going to create my own security first.
Sure. I agree with this 100%. I think there is the illusion of job security in someone else's employ. And the problem that we have is entrepreneurs or business owners were like, yeah, I'm just going to jump and then hope what happens, hope it works out. That's also a bad idea. It seems heroic now. Again, Instagram influencers and YouTubers are like, bro, go all in.
Quit your job and start a blog.
That's right. But what I would advise, because I get this question all the time and you guys are so good at naming things. I had to name my show the Jordan Harbinger Show, which just sounds so sad now. It's just my name.
Hey, theminimalists.com was available for $7 at the time.
Wow.
So that's why we're the minimalists.
Fantastic. What I always advise is, hey, look, keep the job that you have until, and I said this earlier in the show, until you're the bottleneck.
Yeah.
And you're not the bottleneck because someone else has to do your social media. You're the bottleneck when you are the only thing stopping yourself from scaling. And you have to be brutally honest. Not just like, well, I really hate my job this last month, so maybe I'm the bottleneck now. No, it has to be you're coming home from your job, and from 7 p.m. to whenever you fall asleep at the keyboard, you're doing something only you can do. That's when you make the leap.
Yeah.
And you've got income coming in, and it's pretty stable from your side hustle or whatever it is, your entrepreneurial venture. Don't quit before that. And that makes this choice so much easier. Because people, what he's asking is, when do I blindly quit something that's paying the bills and then just pray to the powers that be that my new thing starts making money? You don't. The answer is you don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that. Absolutely. So, I guess going from the art of charm to what you're doing now,
right?
Like you had mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, like you're making good money. There's this stable source of income. Is there any practical, and I got some practical stuff too, but I'm just curious, Jordan, is there any practical stuff that you did to ensure, like, you know what, I can walk away from this paycheck and I can start something else, and feel, you're always gonna have a little bit of fear, but to alleviate as much fear as possible, I guess.
What I did at first, and this was kind of an accidental discovery, what I did at first, it was like, step 1, panic. Step 2, but limit your panic to like a couple of days, depending on how traumatizing it is. My friend Hal Elrod, who you guys might know, he's like, you can feel sorry for yourself for 15 minutes. And this is a guy who had cancer, I think, twice and almost died in a car accident. So he can speak credibly on this particular point.
Okay. Wow. I'm gonna have to look this guy up.
Yeah, he's amazing. I'll introduce you guys.
Cool.
And he wrote this book called The Miracle Morning. It's pretty interesting. What I did was, step 1, panic. Step 2, make a list of people that I know will help me. And this list could be 100 people, but what I did is I started with like 10 or 12 who I knew would not say no. And the reason I did that is because when you're feeling low, down, out, defeated, whatever it is, you don't want to call people where you're like, hey, can you help me? And they're like, oh, I'm really busy, because you'll start to feel even worse because you'll see your support network slowly slipping away.
Yeah.
Call 10 people that day or the next day and you go, look, I'm having a really big problem. Can you help me? That first dozen people that you call that help you, you start to feel bulletproof. You're like, well, if I've got 12 really good friends behind me, I'll be fine.
Wow.
Yeah.
And this can be your parents, but it's even better if it's not.
Right.
Because then you're like, oh, okay, it's not just my family who's like, you can do it, honey. And you're like, thanks, Mom.
You can do it and you're handsome.
Yeah, and, yes, and your mama's handsome boy. That'll only go so far. But if you call your friends and they're like, yeah, I'm happy to figure out how to help you, that's when you start to go, wait a minute, I have a huge support network. And so what I encourage people to do, I call this exercise layoff lifelines, because it's like, imagine you get laid off. Who are the 10 or so people you wish you'd kept in touch with? Like your college guidance counselor,
What a great
your old friends.
perspective, man.
Right? Like, because if you make that list now and it's like, oh, you know, I should have kept in touch with Josh and Ryan, and I should have kept in touch with my high school guidance counselor, and I should have kept in touch with that old boss, and I should have kept in touch with these professors that were really good. Make that list now. Reach out now, because then you don't have an agenda. Because the problem is people go, oh, it's so awkward to reach out. It's awkward to reach out when you're like, hey, man, haven't talked to you in 8 years, so I need a job.
Right, so I need help now.
My house is on fire. Can you come put it out for me?
Right. That's awkward.
We're working on our second documentary right now, and on the soundtrack that we're working with Drew and Nate on from this band, there's a song called Asking on there, and the line is, it just, man, it hit me. Like, and you can't listen to it yet, so there's nothing I can give for you to listen to.
It's impossible for you to hear.
But the line is, I'm sorry I didn't call. I've just been busy.
Yeah.
And like, but when you hear it in a song, especially, like, that's the thing. It's not like you're setting these people up as, I'm going to need to use you someday.
No.
You're setting it up to say, hey man, I screwed up. I didn't keep in touch with this relationship. Let me find a way to repair this. This is something that meant something to me. It doesn't mean that they're going to be your best friend forever now. It just means that you're repairing or you're reconnecting with this person so that you can have a meaningful relationship with them. If they need something, you need to be willing to help them out. This is what a relationship is. There's an us box in every relationship. I'm giving what I can give, and I'm taking what I need.
Yeah.
Not everything I can take, but taking what I need from the relationship.
Yeah, Jordan, I think I just want to highlight how, like, when you're going and asking for help, it's not even like you're looking for handouts, man.
No.
It's like when you're asking for help, you're looking for support. But I think the other thing too is like you are also offering support, and I think that is how you can really make these relationships strong. And you do have people to kind of fall back on. I mean, it's, you know, maybe Bob here doesn't have, you know, someone who can offer him a job, but, you know, maybe Bob has some folks who could, you know, tell their friends and family about, you know, what he's doing or whatever. But yeah, it's so important to hold on to those good relationships. My pithy answer would be this. It's kind of rewrote Josh's. I didn't even realize I did that. It is betting on an employer rather than yourself guarantees disappointment.
Yeah, and even though you're being employed, I really love what Jordan's saying here. It's very practical. It's not like, well, just quit your job and follow your passion.
Put yourself out there. Best dating advice ever. Just put yourself out there. Oh, that's what I've been doing wrong. I've been putting myself out there.
I haven't put myself in here. And so, like, I think that what's true is, yeah, okay, maybe you don't have job security, but if you're betting yourself even in the job, you're going to have better job security in that job. You control the mechanisms that you're able to control there. Yeah, every promotion that I got in the corporate world, and I got quite a few. By age 27, I was the youngest director in our company's 140-year history.
Wow.
Which sounds really impressive until you realize that, like, well, I was the sort of middle manager of who gives a crap. You know,
they made the director position the week before.
You're right.
All right, you're the director now.
Yeah, and the youngest.
Congrats.
One. Happened to be the oldest one too. No, and what I realized in that scenario is I never applied for any of the promotions I got. I worked hard at adding as much value as I could so that I was the clear person to pick for the next thing. And you can do that now. You can pick yourself, even if you're working within a corporate structure, you're working for a small business, or you're working for yourself. It's important to pick yourself.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, you know, Bob, you might get fired tomorrow. Your employer does not look out for you. They look out for the company.
Yeah.
And to sit there and say, oh, well, I've got this guaranteed source of income. You do not have a guaranteed source of income. You have something consistent that you've gotten maybe over the past months, years, whatever, but there's nothing guaranteed in life, especially your job. I think some practical advice: save up 6 months worth of bills. Like for me, that is what really gave me the courage to, when I got laid off. Well, the way I got laid off is, it was a month before I got laid off. I asked to speak to my boss, and I'm like, hey man, you know about the Minimalists, and you know that I'm probably not going to be at this company for the rest of my life. I want to talk to you about what we're going to do, who we're going to replace me with if I happen to leave. And he was like, oh man, that's a good question. He's like, man, you've got things running pretty well. He's like, it's going pretty well. He's like, I don't even know if I would need to replace you. And I'm like,
bad sign.
Yeah, well, for me, it was. I just looked at him. I'm like, huh, that's an interesting thought, isn't it? And then the next month, I get a phone call. Hey, man, I need you to meet me, in room 207 across from HR, where like we've laid off dozens of people before. Like I knew what was coming, but having that conversation with him, and I knew I was planting the seed in his head, and having that conversation with him, I don't think I would have had that if I hadn't saved up 6 months worth of bills. It's not like, I was looking at this safety net like, oh man, I can do anything I want because I got 6 months worth of bills. But what it did do is it gave me confidence to give myself some time, a little bit of a buffer to go out there and find another source of income. So, I mean, just practically, Bob, save up 6 months worth of bills. That will alleviate a lot of fear.
Oh, yeah, good point. And it's hard to do that because people go, 6 months of bills, no problem. Then you start looking at what you're getting, you're buying, and you're like, wait a minute, I probably don't even need to do that.
Yeah, you need to look at the budget and say, I'm probably spending way too much right now. If I just spent less, and I focus on what is truly essential, what is not essential, and then what's junk in my life, I can pare down my current bills. And by the way, that 6 months, that number is going to be a lot smaller.
Right. And I'm not trying to make this sound simple. I mean, it might take someone 6 years to save up 6 months worth of bills, but that goal of having that throughout your work career, like that is, I mean, for me, like I just can't even express how much leverage that gave me when I wanted to talk to my boss about that.
P.S. gentlemen, we have one more question here from Paul. Paul asks, what are the first steps to start a business? We have a lawyer here with us today.
That's
so
right.
When should I hire an accountant, an attorney, employees, and other professionals to help me manage my business? And if you'd like to hear our answer to that question, you can listen to this week's Postscript episode over at the Minimalists private podcast. That's right. Every week we record an additional podcast episode, and it's available exclusively to our Patreon supporters. So if you want to support our show and keep this podcast 100% advertisement free, then head on over to theminimalists.com/support. In addition to our weekly Postscript episodes, the Minimalist private podcast feed includes our Ask the Minimalist Anything episodes, unreleased recordings of our live events. We just put out our Perth event recently, so you can check that out, as well as I think we've done about 15 within the last year.
Wow.
Live events only for our Patreon supporters. And you can also check out the entire back catalog of past private episodes. Once you become a subscriber, you'll also receive a personal link to our private podcast feed so that it plays in your normal podcast player. You can find all the details and all the good stuff, including an additional podcast episode every week over at theminimalists.com/support. And here is a snippet from this week's Postscript episode.
Look, unless you're doing some sort of service where you could have a problem,
Right.
don't worry about the legal structure just yet. Sole proprietor is a thing that kind of just happens. And the problem is you don't have a corporate veil to protect you, which is fine unless you're like a barber and someone slips on your floor. Then you want insurance. You want to make sure you have a corporate structure. But if you're just working from home, solving something for people, you don't really have to worry about that. Get an accountant at the end of the year to help you save on taxes and things like that. But you don't need to have an attorney, an accountant, and have all this corporate structure stuff set up and then spend 10 grand and then be like, cool, now I can start doing business.
Right.
Start making money first.
All right, now it's time for our added value portion of the show. Jordan, this is where each of us talk about something that has added value to our lives recently. It can be a book, or it can be an experience. It can be a physical good. Because quite often when people think of minimalism, they think of those stark white walls, owning nothing, experiencing nothing, just being a monk in a cave. But the truth is, I get far more value from the few things that I own and the experiences that I have. Way more value than I used to when everything was precious to me. I had to hold on to everything.
I just figured you guys lived in like the Apple store without any of the phones or iPads, and that's what your houses looked like.
It's a great idea.
It's like who's the architect? John Paulson, who like, I mean, if you Google search him, he's like, he has the most beautiful aesthetic sort of apartments, but like architecture, but it's so stark that it's not functional.
You live in Magneto's prison from X-Men. Everything's floating magnetically above the ground.
So I have a 5-year-old daughter, and the thing is about 5-year-olds that when we moved into a new place, we waited months to get a couch, and she did not notice at all that we didn't have a couch, we didn't have a dining room table, like just didn't care at all. And I think that's sort of as we get older, we assume we're supposed to have these certain things. And I personally get value from having a couch and having a dining room table, but you realize that like, man, maybe I've been sold a bill of goods. I'm supposed to have these certain things in order to make me happy. But the truth is there are some things that add value to our lives. I'm going to recommend 2 things that have added value to my life recently. I've got 2 books here. Since we're talking about business, I'm only 6 chapters into this, but it's Seth Godin's new book. This is marketing. I'm sure you've seen it. He's been marketing the hell out of it.
This is marketing.
That's apropos, right?
17,000 tweets about it. Yeah.
I'm only 6 chapters through, but I thought this was apropos considering we're talking about business today. But we talked about Derek Sivers and marketing, how marketing is being considerate. In chapter 6, he talks about beyond commodities, and you talked about how we were just selling commodities, we're commodifying stuff.
Not you, but people.
Not us. Well, I mean, if we're not intentional about it, we can too. And so we always have to step back and saying, is this adding value, or am I just trying to squeeze a dollar out of this thing? So he talks about effective marketers don't begin with a solution, with the thing that makes them more clever than everyone else. Instead, we begin with a group we seek to serve, a problem that we seek to solve, and a change that we seek to make. And so that's, I think, ultimately, if you were to sum up what we're talking about today, is we're trying to help people solve problems, and that's what effective businesses do. That's what a minimalist business would do. But then the other book I want to recommend today it comes out in January. It's called Company of One by Paul Jarvis. Do you know Paul?
I do, yeah. He listens to my show and he wrote to me, and I was like, oh, I love when smart people who wrote books write in and they're like, I listen to you because it's so validating, right? Like, oh, good. I'm so glad to hear that.
I am awesome. Yes. Paul thinks so.
I always knew it. Hi, Mom.
He's super talented, but this book in particular, I wrote a blurb for it, and the blurb was effectively like, your business can thrive with less. He talks about responsible growth, or the idea of not needing to grow your business. Maybe your business is big enough, or maybe you even have to shrink a business in order to grow it effectively.
Man, going back to Johnny's question.
And so we'll put a link to this in the show notes as well. It's called Company of One, but it's a mindset. It's not just about it being an entrepreneur, but if you are an entrepreneur, I think it's a great book for you. But even if you're working for a corporation, he talks about the Company of One mentality of working for yourself, but also doing so with fewer resources. I think this book will help you out a lot. I've got the advanced copy here, but it'll come out in January, and you all can pre-order it now. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. Ryan, what's adding value to your life recently?
Well, you know how my sleep sucks. Mentioned that earlier in the podcast. Mariah bought this. It's 4-sigmatic reishi mushroom elixir.
Yeah.
And it's basically, it aids deep sleep. So I will say, man, like, not last night, but the night before, I didn't drink any, and I got 0 deep sleep. Last night I drank it. I got like 25 minutes of deep sleep. But what I've noted, and that's not the first time I've kind of had that where I forgot to drink it and didn't get any deep sleep.
Yeah, Bex uses this stuff too.
It really, really does. Like, I mean, according to my Oura Ring, like, it definitely makes a difference with my deep sleep. Now, 25 minutes of deep sleep still sucks really bad.
But it's better than 0.
Better than 0 minutes. Yeah, exactly. So I would recommend, like, if you're looking for another sleep aid, like, it's a pretty natural, healthy thing to take.
Jordan, what's been adding value to your life recently?
It's funny you're talking about sleep aids. I actually got an air purifier. It was from a sponsor, and I thought, like, okay, fine, whatever. It's like the iPhone of air purifiers. I get this thing, and I put it in, and put it to work, and I'm like, oh, let me check the filter, see what's in here. Oh my gosh, there's disgusting stuff in the air inside your house. You have no idea. And I thought, like, is this a trick? Is this filter slowly degrading so that it looks like all this crap is in the air? And granted, I live in NorCal, so there's wildfires, but I don't leave my windows open. Right. It's closed. And I have 2 cats that don't have any hair. I have hairless cats, so there's not like cat hair and pet dander in there. There's just gross crap in the air. And I noticed that my sleep, I track my sleep with Aura and with the Apple Watch and things like that, and my sleep quality has gone up. I've been able to fall asleep better. It's just incredible. The other thing, and I know we're probably only supposed to give one, but this is such an important thing for sleep. There's this eye mask that I got, and it's like almost like a little pillow that straps onto your eyes, and it's very soft, and it has a little cutout for the nose. It's not one of those elastic band ones. It literally is like a pillow quilted thing that goes all the way across your head. This thing knocks me the heck out, and I'll wake up and go, what time is it? And my wife's like, 7:30, and I'm like, wait, you mean to tell me that I slept through the entire night? I didn't get up 58 times starting at 4 a.m. to like go to the bathroom and then not fall asleep. I just zonked out, and I'll look at my watch and it's like, wow, you slept like a boss last night.
We'll get the link from you, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Do you know the brand of the eye mask? I'm just curious. Like, I'm interested now.
Yeah, I'll find it.
Okay, cool.
I'm so sorry that I don't have like
worries.
a.
We'll put it
It'll be in the show notes.
Cool.
This thing is it was like $30, and people are like, $30 for an eye mask? You're an idiot. You can get one on an airplane for free. This is different.
Wow.
It doesn't let in any
I wonder
light.
if it's the same eye mask that,
I'm
that
thinking
we
is it
recommended.
green?
It's
No,
like
it's
a blue-green. Yeah,
Blue.
it is.
Green.
It's totally that.
I think it's the same one we use.
Yeah.
It's like it's got the Velcro in the back.
Yes, yeah, it's that one.
It might be the same one.
Yeah.
It is. I agree.
It's sort of satin or something.
Yes.
Yeah, it's that one.
It's
Okay,
so
okay.
good. Yeah,
It
we'll
is
put
a
a
good
link to it
one.
in the show. So
Yeah.
Sean, you already
Totally
have
agree.
the link to it.
That thing is amazing.
I don't
It
know
really
the
is.
brand name, but I know that it works really
It
well.
might not even have a brand
Yeah.
name. It might just be like sleep mask. It's amazing.
I was wearing it last night, so I can attest to it as well. All right, let's move on to Right Here, Right Now, where we talk about what's going on in the lives of the minimalists. Before we do that, I just want to say thank you to Jordan.
Yeah, man.
If you're listening to this, check out the Jordan Harbinger Show. Where can they find you on social media? You're at Jordan Harbinger, right?
I'm at Jordan Harbinger on all forms of social media. Thank God nobody took that. I looked. There's no other Jordan Harbinger that I can find anywhere in the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're a lucky
you're
man.
The original man.
I guess so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Jordan, I think you're a super talented interviewer, and I'm
Thank
really
you.
grateful you decided to spend this. I think this was really informative. It
was fun.
Thanks so much for being here, man.
And
Thanks for having me.
Christmas is coming up. When this will be out 1 week before Christmas, and so have you considered buying Jen a brick for Christmas?
A brick?
Yes.
Like an actual brick for a house?
Yes. Well, for more like a grocery store. So Ryan and I are from a
food
town
co-op.
Yeah. So we're from a town called Dayton, Ohio, right?
I've heard of it.
Yeah. Just right down I-75 from where you grew up.
That's right.
And so you're from Michigan, right?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, so we grew up in Dayton, Ohio, spent the first 31 years of our lives there, and the second largest food desert in the country is on the west side of Dayton. 40% of
Didn't
the
know that.
city lives in West Dayton, and there is not a single grocery store on the entire west side of Dayton.
How is that possible?
I know, right?
it's
the
crazy.
last one closed during the Great Recession, so 2008, 2009, the Kroger there closed, and there is not a single grocery store there, so people don't have access to healthy food. And so what Ryan and I are doing this holiday season, we are trying to get people to buy bricks on behalf of their friends and family. It's the gift of contribution. A brick with labor costs about $1. Ryan and I are trying to raise the last $100,000 to build a grocery co-op. We've partnered with a company called Gym City Market, and it is a food co-op. It's going to be the only grocery store in West Dayton, and I think we're over 60% of the way there, but we need our audience's help. So if you need to do some last-minute shopping for Jen, a brick...
She loves bricks. I'll give her that.
you just go to theminimalists.com/brick. You can see the video that Ryan and I did. You can also donate. You can buy a brick for each of your friend and family members. So spend $20, buy 20 bricks for this co-op, and you're doing something really good. You're helping provide food for people who don't have access to healthy food. I mean, they can go to a liquor store and buy some Cheetos
That's
or
what
something.
people are doing, right?
Yeah.
I used to work in downtown Detroit, and I was like, where do people shop? And he goes, at the corner store. I'm like, that place sells booze, cigarettes. There's like milk that's 5 times the price of milk should be. And he goes, dude, people don't have cars. They have to walk there.
Yeah.
And I was like, how are you getting out of poverty when you're paying 5 times more than I'm paying at Whole Foods for food?
Yeah.
That's exactly it. So we're trying to change that in Dayton. Dayton is very similar to Detroit in that respect, and we're trying to provide an option for people. So if you're interested, you want to help out, and also, by the way, people who get this, you can print it out, you can put it in an envelope as a Christmas gift. It's a stocking stuffer. Everyone will be grateful for that, and it's an opportunity that anyone can contribute to. I've had so many people say, hey, all I had was $1 to be able to donate to this, so thank you for making it available for anyone who wants to contribute something. So if you want to contribute $1, great. If you want to contribute $1,000, great. We're really grateful, and it's doing something meaningful. So head on over to theminimalists.com/brick, and while you're over at theminimalists.com, we also have we have 29 ideas for a debt-free holiday. So Jordan, I don't know if you know this, but 28% of people are still in debt from last year's Christmas gift shopping.
That's so horrible.
28% of people, and then of course we're going to go further into debt by buying more useless stuff with money we don't have. We're buying things people don't want and giving it to them because we feel obligated to do so. So Ryan and I, we went out and we talked to our friends about what are some of the cheap or inexpensive or free experiences or consumables that you can gift for the holiday season. So once you've bought all the bricks that you can buy and you want to still contribute to other people, what are the experiences? There's 29 different ideas over at theminimalists.com/ideas. And if you want to comment on this episode, you can do so over at youtube.com/theminimalists. Also on YouTube, we're doing quickie episodes of the Minimalist Podcast. We're doing living room conversations where Ryan and I answer questions in our living rooms or in our homes. And we're doing a house tour soon as well. Every Sunday at theminimalists.com, we will send you an email, some sort of writing, essay, video, etc. If you want to sign up for Simple Sundays, it's just theminimalists.com. Enter your email address up there. We'll never send you any spam. We'll never send you any junk or any promo-y stuff, but you will get any new writings that we put out. You'll also get the podcast show notes in your inbox if you're interested in checking out the show notes. Just head on over to theminimalists.com. Enter your email address at the top. Ryan, what else you got for us?
Man, Jordan, so we live in a meme culture right now, man.
Yeah, we do.
Like we see a meme and we take it for fact, or we see a headline and we're like, oh my God, like that's, and then we start telling all our friends about this crazy headline.
Yeah.
And lately, Josh and I, we've basically been encouraging our readers to, our listeners, our viewers, and our readers to really read more, to get a diverse opinion. And when they see a headline, when they see a meme, to really look into it to see whether or not something is in fact true. So I'm just going to leave us with encouraging people to read more and to stay informed. Oh, and you know what? I got some voicemail comments and tips from our listeners. Check them out.
Hey, Josh and Ryan. This is Sarah from Dahlonega, Georgia. I was just calling about your cities episode a few weeks back. And I just wanted to say that if life takes you to a city that you think you're going to hate, you may find out that you absolutely love it. Personally, I was in a long-distance relationship for 3 years, and the only way my wife and I could figure out how to be together was for me to move to the small town of Dahlonega in northeast Georgia, and I am originally from Houston, Texas, and I thought I would absolutely hate living in a small town 2 hours away from a big city, that I would miss all of my amenities. And to be honest, I was kind of miserable for the first 3 months until I started to allow myself to enjoy the beauty of a small town and living in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains and being able to enjoy new amenities and things that I never thought that I would enjoy. I never want to live in a city again. I've lost 40 pounds. I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life. And I just wanted to say that if for some reason you find yourself somewhere you don't think you'll like, look for things you might like, because it might just change your idea of what the perfect living situation is for you.
Hey guys, this is Chris from Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina. I'm calling in regards to the Upgrades podcast. Podcast 162. I didn't hear it on the podcast itself, but I was forever in the state of trying to upgrade my job until recently, and would like to address that a little bit. I just wanted to say that there are ways that you can either find a way to be okay with your job, not feel prey to ambition, or fall prey to ambition, but rather to be okay with where you're at. Maybe find a way to upgrade your salary without upgrading your job, or find a way to upgrade your money situation by taking a side job or looking into things that you like to do that could bring in some side income. And perhaps that side income can grow and scale into something that's a little bit more lucrative. And before long, you're doing the thing that you like to do full time and making a living at it.
Hi guys, it's Sally from Australia calling. Just a recommendation for Christmas gift giving that I've borrowed from Rebecca Lavoie from the fantastic podcast Mum and Dad Are Fighting. She calls it Treasures from the Attic, and it's a Kris Kringle type of setup where each family member selects another family member, but rather than purchasing a gift, you need to consider something that you already own that you feel that the other person would like as a gift, and then you choose a household item to wrap that gift. You're not allowed to buy wrapping paper, so you could use newspaper or tin foil or something around the house. We did this with our 3 kids last year, and we gave them full responsibility for selecting their gift and wrapping it. They were aged 11, 8 and 5. And they've really loved it and asked to do it again this year. Last year we received things like books and jewellery. Someone received some tools, notepaper. It was really nice. This year I'll be getting my 6-year-old son the experience of using my clawfoot bath, something that I usually determine as completely off limits to my children. I thought it was a great idea, and it's been the most memorable and enjoyable gift-giving experience in our family.
All right, y'all, that's it for this episode. If you have a question for the Minimalists or a comment, give us a call, 406-219-7839. You can also email a voice memo to podcast@theminimalists.com. And if you leave here with just one message, two things, actually. Jordan, thank you so much once again for being here.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
You're really grateful. Dude. And if you all leave here today with just one message, we hope it's this. Love people and use things, because the opposite never works. Thanks for listening, y'all.
We'll see you next time. Bye.
The Minimalist.